personality. Okay. Before we start about psychoanalytic, let me give a brief history about Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was born in 1856 in Freiburg, Moravia. Now is a part of Czech Republic. When he was 4, he moved to Vienna, and he really excelled in his school, and he obtained his medical degree from the University of Vienna. First, he started out as a researcher in neurology, but since he wanted to support his family, he moved into private medical practice to earn more money. During that time, he studied hypnosis with Jean-Martin Charcot in Paris. After that, he moved back to Vienna and started a private practice to treat patients with nervous disorder. That's when he started to get the idea that a thing as unconscious mind exists. So he says that Freud began developing the idea that portion of a human mind were outside conscious awareness. The unconscious is the part of the mind about which the conscious mind has no awareness. So, and then he began developing this idea about unconscious mind. And then in 19,000, he wrote a book about it, The Interpretation of Dreams. In this book, he described how the unconscious mind expresses itself through dreams, express its desires, motives, and secrets through dreams. In 1902, a small group of followers of Freud started meeting with him every Wednesday to talk about this theory. And he will discuss about the patient's progress, smoke cigarettes. In 1908, they formed the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. In 1909, he had his first and only visit to United States by the invitation of psychologist G. Stanley Hall, and he gave a few lectures about this psychoanalysis. In 1910, the International Psychoanalytic Association was formed. During this time, some accepted his ideas, while others opposed it. The theory that the adult personality was the result of how a person as a child coped with his or her sexual and aggressive urges was considered politically incorrect by standards of the Victorian morality. Okay. In 1938, the Nazis of Germany invaded Austria. So Freud, along with his wife and 6 children, fled to London. And the following year, 1939, he died of cancer of jaw and throat. After that, his daughter Anna Freud took over until she died in 1982. Now, the house of Sigmund Freud in London functions as a Freud museum in London. Okay. Now, moving on to the fundamental assumptions of psychoanalytical theory. These fundamental assumptions is about how a person's mind, how a person's mind motivates someone to do something. Like, what is the reason behind someone's actions? According to Freud, he proposed a source of energy that is within each person and used the term psychic energy to refer to this wellspring motivation. Freud believed that this psychic energy operated according to the law of conservation of energy. The amount of psychic energy an individual possesses remained constant throughout her lifetime, and personality change was viewed as redirection of a person's psychic energy. And uh, so let's move on to the basic instinct. A basic instinct of someone, or known as innate force, uh, he Freud put forward two fundamental categories of instinct. First is self-preservation instinct, and the second is sexual instinct. And these instincts are influenced by Darwin's theory of evaluation. Self-preservation instinct, influenced by the theory of natural selection, while the sexual instinct was influenced by selection by reproduction. But after a while, Freud combined these two into one instinct, that is life instinct. And afterwards, uh, with his experience with the World War I, he developed the idea of death instinct, which is the instinct to destroy something, the instinct towards destruction and aggression. So now there is two basic instincts, that is libido, life instinct, the need to be satisfied and life sustain and pleasure oriented urges. Another one is thanatos, death instinct, the urge to destroy, harm, and aggress against others. Initially, he thought these two instincts opposed each other, but later on, he learned that they combine in various ways. For example, let's take eating. The act of eating is to ensure a life. It's a life instinct to ensure that we survive. But at the same time, there's also a death instinct involved in it. Like we have to kill something to eat it. So yeah, so these both instincts correlate. And the second one is unconscious motivation. Sometimes we don't know why we do what we do. So to understand this, according to Freud, the human mind consists of three parts. The first one is the conscious mind, the conscious part where we know what we are doing at this moment, at the present time. What we are doing is the conscious mind, like the thoughts we are having, the feelings, the perception towards something. It's all in our conscious mind. And the second one is the pre-conscious mind. The pre-conscious mind is where the part where any piece of information that we are not presently thinking, but that could be easily retrieved and made conscious. For example, at this moment we are not thinking about it, but when someone asks about it, we can remember and answer them back. And the final part is the unconscious mind. This, according to Freud, this is the largest part of the mind. This is where the unaccepted information about somebody resides. Like some acts that, like socially unaccepted urges, were kept in this part of the mind. For example, a child feels like he wants to kill somebody, but these kind of acts are not accepted by society. So we keep these urges to ourselves in this unconscious mind. Okay, moving forward. Okay, so these three types of minds can be related to an iceberg. The top part where we can see the iceberg is known as the conscious mind, because we know that we can see it, we can feel it. And the part just below that conscious mind is subconscious mind, where we can still have memory of it, but at this moment we are not thinking about it. And the iceberg at the darkest part of the sea is the unconscious mind, where we can't see it, but it still exists. Okay. So, and the third one is the psychic determinism, where nothing happens by chance. Each and every act or thought or feeling we have, there's a reason beside it. There's no such thing as accident. Each accident that happens in daily life are a motivated unconscious. For example, a psychology professor referred to Sigmund Freud as Sigmund Freud, and then he said that he didn't mean to. But according to Freud, if he didn't think about it, he wouldn't have said it out loud. And then, according to Freud, mental illness can be caused by unconscious motivations. This can be proved by the case of Anna O. Anna O was a 21-year-old woman whose father died of tuberculosis, or known as TB. And then after her father died, she started developing severe cough, and then loss of movement in her right side, and then disturbance of vision, hearing, and then finally she had the inability to drink liquids. Even though Freud didn't directly treat or meet Anna O, her physician Joseph Brewer consulted with Freud, and then Dr. Brewer diagnosed Anna O as a hysteria, and then he started developing this therapy, which is talking to Anna O, and then she started talking about her symptoms and the particular about her memories of events that happened before the onset of the symptoms. For example, she started coughing because of the memory of her father coughing during his TB, and then her inability to drink water was caused by seeing a dog drink from a lady's cup. She was so disgusted by it that she can't drink liquids anymore. But after talking and finding out this is the reason why she couldn't drink water or started coughing, she realized that she can start drinking liquid again. So according, looking into this case, we can see that some mental illnesses can be treated by talking to others, but by resurfacing some traumatic events that are kept in our unconscious mind. If we bring it forth, some cases can be treated. Okay. Now let's talk about some example of unconscious mind. These are like proofs of unconscious mind. First is the blind side. Okay, according to blind side, one part of the mind knows about something that another part of the mind does not know about. For example, we can take people with cortical blindness. Okay, people with cortical blindness can't see a object, but when we ask to describe it, they will be able to describe it, like they can tell its color, its shape. So how could this happen? So as an explanation for such unconscious perception has been offered in terms of nerve pathway from eye to the brain. The optic nerve carries information from the eye into the brain, and the majority of this information is transferred to the primary visual center in the striate cortex. However, pathways split off of the optical nerve before getting to the visual center and carry some of the information to other parts of the brain. So, if the vision center were completely destroyed, the person who will not recognize what the object was, but the person might know if it was moving or how he or she felt about it when she has seen it before. And another example of unconsciousness is a deliberation without awareness. Is the we can explain it as the unconscious tend to continue deliberating difficult decisions and arrive to a conclusion even though they were kept away from conscious mind. Like, when we are conscious, we can make an easy decision. Like if it's an easy option, if it's only two options, we can make an easy decision. But when it comes to, like, we have a lot of options, like 16 to 20 options or maybe 100. When it comes to that kind of decision, our mind can make better decisions when we are not thinking about it consciously. Like if a person confronted with a difficult decision can put it out of his or her conscious mind for a period of time, then the unconscious mind will continue to deliberate on it outside of the person's awareness, helping him or her to arrive at a sudden or often correct decision. So when this kind of difficult decision we take during without thinking consciously in our unconscious mind, we can make a better choice. Now we can move on to the structure of a personality. This one we have learned in our first semester about ego and superego. So it are known as the reservoir of psychic energy. It is something that we are all born with and is the source of all drives and urges. Okay, it is like a spoiled kid. It's selfish, impulsive, and pleasure-loving. So this it operates according to the pleasure principle. It has this desire for instant gratification, and it dominates during infancy. The moment we are born with this it, and it is a German word for it. And it does not listen to reasons, does not follow logic, has no values or morals, and has little patience. It doesn't care about the consequences, and it doesn't live in the reality. That's what we call primary process thinking. It's the thinking without logic rules or conscious thought or anchor in reality. So if it does not get something it desires, it tends to imagine it or dream about it, so it gets satisfied. That's why it's called wish fulfillment. If the it desires something and it's not that, the it creates a mental image of it to satisfy its need. And the second part is the ego, the executive of personality. This is the part of the mind that constrains the it to reality. It develops after 2 or 3 years of life. Ego operates according to reality principle. Even though ego tries to satisfy the it also takes reality into account. It takes the surroundings, the obligations into account before acting up. And ego understands that some actions can lead to some problems. Therefore, direct expression of it must be avoided, redirected, or postponed. That's why ego operates according to secondary process thinking too. Secondary process thinking is the development of strategies for problem solving or obtaining satisfaction. For example, if a child feels like wanting to hit a sister, uh, that is a instinct of it. It wants to hit a child wants to hit his or her sister, but it's not socially acceptable. So the ego part of our mind will process this and come to a solution. It will end up teasing her sister instead, instead of hitting her. And the last part, our part, is the superego. Superego is the upholders of societal values and ideals. This is the part of the mind that internalizes the values, morals, and ideals of society. This superego is instilled by socializing agents like parents, school, religions, and the most important development of superego is linked to a child's identification with his or her parents. What her or his parents do, that's what the child's gonna take example for and continue doing. And this super ego of the mind determines what's right or what's wrong for a person. When someone tends to do something wrong, this super ego makes them feel guilty. But when it goes right, this super ego makes them feel pride. And the most important thing is super ego is not bound by reality. It's free to set standard for virtue and for self-worth. But how does these three interact? This ego and superego. They always in constant interaction. They have different goals, provoking internal conflict within an individual. It says it's okay to do something. Superego says no. Ego says it's alright. So how do they interact? Okay, for example, let's take a young woman who is last in a line at a fast food restaurant, and a man in front of her dropped a $20 bill without realizing it. The it part of her will say it's okay to take it, just take it, nobody is seeing. But the super ego part though will say totally no, it's not right to steal it. But the ego part of it will rationalize it. It will think whether someone is seeing it. If not, take it. If someone is seeing, don't take it. Maybe if I give it to somebody, if I give it to the person back, maybe he will reward me back. But that's how the ego part works. It rationalizes and it balances the it and super ego part of somebody. Ego gives a well-balanced mind to someone. When the ego is not stable, ego is not strong enough to stabilize you, this id part and super ego part will tend to compete with each other, which is the reason which we experience anxiety. Anxiety is an unpleasant state which acts as a signal that something is wrong and something must be done. It is a signal that the control of the ego is being threatened by reality, by impulses from the id, or by harsh control exerted by the superego. Such an anxiety might be expressed as as a physical symptom such as rapid heart rate, sweaty palms, and irregular breathing. When this keep on continuing, this person tends to fall into the verge of panic. So to avoid it, is everybody must have a strong ego in them. A well-balanced mind, one that is free of the anxiety, is achieved by having a strong ego. Now, the last part is the ego depletion. Ego depletion is about, it tells like if we make a self-control decision, then the following self-control decision will be hard to overcome. Like for example, okay, let me give the definition. The more energy used by one self-control activity, the less energy is available for another person's self-control activity. Example, let me explain. So the psychic energy is like a closed energy system. When we use up our psychic energy to overcome a self-control activity, we will lose some energy. So the remaining energy will be less, right? So the following self-control activity will be hard to overcome because we have less energy to provide for that activity. So that is all for the ego depletion, and I thought my friend will present the next slide. And my name is Pawan Sriwijaya. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Rin Shagani Pinto Mubaka. Today I will talk about the limits of personality. First is types of anxiety. Objective anxiety, which called reality anxiety, occurs in response to a real external threat to the person. For example, when being confronted by a large aggressive-looking man with a knife while taking a shortcut through an alley, will exhibit objective anxiety, which is fear in most people. In this case, the control of the ego is being threatened by an external factor rather than by internal conflict. So objective anxiety is about when you are afraid of being threatened by external threat. Neurotic anxiety occurs when there is a direct conflict between the idea and the ego. The danger is that the ego may lose control over an unacceptable desire of the idea. Example, a woman who becomes anxious when she feels sexually attracted to someone, who panics at even the thought of sexual arousal, is experiencing neurotic anxiety. Neurotic anxiety is when you're afraid of doing something that can embarrass you. So moral anxiety caused by conflict between ego and the superego. Example, a young woman with bulimia nervosa, which is an eating disorder, might run 3 miles and 100 sit-ups in order to make up for having eaten a forbidden food. People who punish themselves who have low self-esteem or who feel worthless and ashamed most of the time are most likely suffering from moral anxiety, from an overly powerful superego which constantly challenges the person to live up to higher and higher expectations. Moral anxiety is about when you feel guilty after doing unacceptable things. So, conclusion, the ego faces a difficult task in attempting to balance the impulses of the ID, the demons of the superego, and the realities of the external world. It is as if the ID is saying, I want it now, the superego is saying, you will never have it, and the superego is caught in the middle saying, maybe if I can just work things out. Sometimes these conflicts are expressed in disguised way in various thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. In most cases, such conflicts are accompanied by anxiety, and so we turn now to a discussion of various mechanisms that people use to defend themselves against anxiety. Defense mechanism. Although intra-psychic conflicts frequently evoke anxiety, people can successfully defend themselves from conflict and never consciously feel the anxiety. Example in conversion reaction. When a conflict is converted to a symptom, the conflict is expressed in the form of physical symptom, an illness or weakness in a part of the body. Such people may be indifferent to the symptom, not anxious about losing pain in the leg or having a headache that will not go away. The symptom helps them avoid the anxiety, even the symptom will not make them anxious. The defense mechanism functions to protect the ego and to minimize anxiety and distress. There are many types of defense mechanism. First, depression. Freud used the term repression as the process of preventing unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or results from reaching conscious awareness. Repression is defensive in the sense that through it a person avoids the anxiety that would arise if the unacceptable materials were made conscious. Freud learned that people often tended to remember the pleasant circumstances surrounding an event most easily than the unpleasant one. He concluded that the unpleasant memories were often repressed, which means that you put the unacceptable things, thoughts, feelings, or just to the back of your mind. There are empirical studies of repression. In 1979, studies showed that repressors self-reported feelings of distress were lower than non-reported, but their physiological responses showed more distress. So since then, repressors have been found to recall fewer unpleasant memories from childhood, and it seems that the experience of repression happens during encoding and not recall. Somehow repressors deepen their emotional reaction to bad events and didn't allow them to become encoded. So finding repressors are by measuring anxiety and defensiveness. So as the subject who deny being anxious but have high defensiveness are most likely repressors. So next is denial. A person in denial insists that things are not the way they seem. Denial involves refusing to see the facts. Example, a man whose wife has left him might still set a place at the dinner table for her instead that she is supposed to come home anytime. Playing out this scenario night after night might be more acceptable than acknowledge that she is in reality gone. Fundamental attribution error: tendency to blame events outside one's control for failure, but to accept responsibility for success is one example of denial. In health perspective, people who see smoking despite knowing the fact that it can lead to their death also call denial. Denial often shows up in dreams and fantasies. Denial often shows up in dreams and fantasies. Example, a person will dream about how things might have done, could have then not done. That's the wrong person think rather than face their reality. Denial is means that you refusing to see the facts. So next is placement. Iterative or unacceptable impulses is channeled or redirected from its original source to a non-threatening target. Example, a woman who has an argument with a supervisor at work is really angry with the supervisor, but her ego keeps her in check because after all the supervisor is the boss and can make her work life difficult, so she goes home and displaces her anger onto her husband, perhaps yelling and at him or blaming him. For noted that fears are redirected through displacement, like a boy who fears his father will redirect their fear toward horses. Real displacement is unconscious means of avoiding the recognition that one has certain appropriate or acceptable feelings towards some specific person or object. Those feelings that are displaced onto another person or subject is more appropriate or acceptable. Displacement is when you channeling or redirecting your thoughts, feelings, or some your desire to from the original source to non-threatening target. So next is rationalization. It involves generating acceptable reasons for outcomes that might otherwise appear socially unacceptable. The goal is to reduce anxiety by coming up with an explanation for an event that is easier to accept than the real reasons. Example, students who receive a failing grade on a term paper might explain away by insisting that the teacher did not give clear direction for them for how to write the paper. So rationalization is rationalize the unacceptable things that you do, give reason to the acceptable things that happened to you. So next is situation formation. In an attempt to stifle the expression of unacceptable urge, a person may continue to display a flurry of behavior that indicates the opposite impulse. Example, imagine a woman who is angry with her supervisor. This can reach the stage of displacement. If instead of expressing her anger, her ego unconsciously resort to reaction formation, then she might go out of her way to be overly kind to her boss to show the boss special courtesy and consideration. Reaction formation is when you do something opposite that you want to do. Projection. Based on the notion that sometimes we see in others the traits and desires we find most upsetting in ourselves, we literally project our own unacceptable qualities onto others. So that we hate them instead of hating ourselves. For having those unacceptable qualities or desires, at the same time we can disparage their tendencies or characteristics in creation without limiting that we possess them. Other people become the target by virtue of their having qualities that we intensely dislike in ourselves. Example, married women have affairs are more suspicious than other husbands than their wives are unfaithful to them. False consensus effect. Tendency many people have to assume that others are similar to them, like extroverts will think many other people are also extroverted. Projectionists who project or things or assume that other people are the things that you are. Sublimation is channeling unacceptable sexual aggressive instinct into sexual desired activities. Example, going out to shop when they are angry and acting on their anger or even engaging in other less adaptive defense mechanisms such as displacement. Watching football or pose is more desirable than beating someone up. The positive is it allows limited expression of any tendency so that you can have to invest energy in holding the idea in check. Submission is when you channel your unacceptable desire or things to something acceptable. Next is defense mechanism in daily life. Defense mechanism may be useful in coping with occurrences that happen in our daily life, but there are circumstances where the defense mechanism make the situation worse, because other people may avoid people who protect the law. A person who displeases frequently may have few friends. To know it had become problems if it begins inhibiting the ability to be productive or limiting the ability to maintain relationships. So for more info about defense mechanism, you can go to link above. To link below. So psychosexual stages of personality development. Probably all people pass through a series of stages in personality development that have this conflict that they need to resolve the unresolved before personality. First stage reaches the conflict about attaining a type of sexual gratification by investing libidinal energy in a specific body part. Each stage named after the body part which sexual energy invested. If the child fails to resolve the conflict, they may start in the stages which call fixation. First is oral stage 0 to 8 months. The main sources are mouth, lips, and tongue. The main concepts are weaning and withdrawing from the breast or bottle. Its biological and psychological component. Biological component is the idea one immediate gratification associated with taking nourishment and obtaining pleasure through the mouth. Psychological component excessive pleasure versus dependency with the fear of being left to fend for oneself. Sometimes child has a painful or traumatic experience during the weaning process resulting in decreased fixation at the oral stage. The fixation example is people who overeat, smoke, inviting some sucking or pencil chewing. Psychological level, little people will be overly dependent. So another conflict is biting. They find pleasure from biting and chewing, but the parents may discourage them, afraid they might bite others, making them fixated and become homicide for some mocking in their later life. So anal stage, 18 months to 3 years old, the main source is the anal speech. The main conflict are from the first explain pieces during toiletry and from retaining pieces. Because early desires immediate tension reduction by defecting whenever and wherever the urges arises, but the parent want to instill the child self-control through toilet training. Some achieve too little control and grow up to be sloppy and dirty, some too much control and grow up to be someone who take pleasure in the act of self-control and be in control. Visitor people become compulsive, overly neat, rigid, and never messy. Visitor people toilet training is to exercise choice and willpower. So that if the child can withhold, so that so if the child can withhold when the toilet training, the child may grow up being stingy, holding back, not giving others what they want, and overly willful and stubborn. So by stage 3 to 5 years old, the main sources is discovery of their own genital and discover pleasure of touching them. For boys, there are hippocampus and social anxiety. A hippocampus is when unconscious wish to have his mother or to himself elementing their father. But social anxiety is fear of losing their parents because they are afraid their father will consider them, so they keep out their sexual desire for their mother. So they find another way to have their mother by be like their father, which is identification. They believe to be the real solution of the super ego more than male gender roles begin. For girls, their penis and be ultra complex. So penis envy is when the girl desires her father but envies him for his penis, so they blame their mother for the lack of it. Electra complex by Carla Jung. Electra, Greek myth character, convinced her brother to kill their mother after the mother murdered their father. But Freud rejected this Electra complex because the solution is the development of superego, but he believed women must morally inferior to men. So next stage, latency stage, 6 years old anti-puberty. This is when This is also called rest stage. Later psychological development occurs. They go to school and learning the skills and abilities necessary to take on the role of an adult. Subsequent psychologists argue that development involves learning to make decisions for oneself, interact and friends with others, developing identity and learning the meaning of work. So the last stage, genital stage, puberty until that. The answer is genital, but not in the manner of self-manipulation associated with the early stage. People reach this stage if they have resolved the conflict of previous stages. Personality development complete in the age of 5 or 6. It depends on how the conflict that rise during infancy and which are resolved. So in conclusion, Freud's psychosexual theory about personality development both are normal and abnormal. It states that we are born with drive for sexual pleasure, the ID, but concern of civilized society limit the ways we can satisfy that drive. So the natural conflicts and stages are universal, but the specific instances and outcomes are unique. So a metaphor by Freud, an army troops are called into battle for each stages. So if the resolution incomplete in some stages, then some soldier will be left behind to monitor that particular conflicts. Act as psychic energy stand guard, so to let psychosexual conflicts break out again. So the successful personality development defined by the ability to be productive and maintain mature adult sexual relationships. So for more info, you can go to link below. So thank you everyone for listening. That's all for
Hey everyone, I'm Shalnika present. Today, I would like to talk about techniques for revealing the unconscious. Psychoanalysis is a psychotherapy that is used by most of the psychoanalysts. There are a few techniques to use. The first one is free association. So, what is free association? It is it is used when the patients they are in a comfortable mode and relaxed. When their sensory of thoughts are in a relaxed mode, whatever they are saying is most probably something that is from unconscious mind. So when they talk randomly without thinking anything, so in that time their repressed feelings and memories will come out. But it doesn't work in one session. It takes probably a few sessions to work it out. So they need lots of practice to do it. So patients are given freedom to tell whatever that comes to their mind. So they can tell anything that is a repressed feeling, maybe because when they're talking, they don't know what's they're thinking because their sensory thoughts is already relaxed mode. So psychoanalysis can make the patients to realize what their cause of their conflicts because the psychotherapy is to make sure the patients to know their own cause of their problem so they can resolve it, not the psychoanalysis. And most importantly, the psychoanalysis should be very alert to everything, every single point the patient says, because sometimes they could say anything important. So if the analysis is not very alert, they could miss the very crucial point of their problems. So the next one is dream analysis. It's like interpreting the dream's content for uncovering the unconscious mind. Dreams are something that comes, a message that comes from a deep region of mind, and a way to satisfy ID and own urges and desires. So there are two content. First one is manifest, what dream actually contains, and the second one is latent content, which is what the dream represents. And also, ego still works in the dream because it gives the patient or the person to sleep while they are dreaming. Because if the dream is very wild and violent, it could make the patient to wake up from their dream. So when the ego works, the patient would be not easily wake. So the impulses are discussed into acceptable representations. For example, a person dreams that he or she has been chased. It could represent that the person are encouraged to do something that they are something that is hanging over their head for a long time. So the third one is projective test, personality assessment that use our unconscious reactions to an image to paint an accurate picture of our personality. It's like an analysis will give us kind of image or ink fault, and the patient should have to answer it with their mind. Whatever that comes to their mind could be their repressed feelings or maybe their current feelings. An example is Rorschach ink ball test. Okay, how does it work? An example is an aggressive person might see teeth, claw, or blood in that ink ball. If the person has oral fixation, he could see some food, or he or she could see someone eating in the process of psychoanalysis. Through the techniques of psychoanalysis, the analyst knows about the causes of the patient's problems. Now it is the turn of the page to know their own problems and causes. So the first process is interpretation. What is interpretation? It's the action of explaining the meaning of something, letting know to say frankly, letting know the patient the result of the analysis, so they could know their own causes and problems in their life. So in first situation, the psychologist could say to the patient in a questioning tone like, could it be that the reason of why you are sleeping while on a date with your boyfriend is that you don't want to feel sexually attractive to him? So from this question, the patient knows what is the cause of her behavior. Her behavior is that she feels sleepy with her boyfriend, and what does it cause? Because of she does not ready for sex. It makes her feel sleepy when she's with her boyfriend. So through the process of interpretation, the patient could know better about their problems. Next process is called insight. The intense emotional experience that accompanies with the repressed materials, or could be said in simple form, that is clear understanding. It's the understanding of the patient on his or her problem and the causes. Going through this process, another one is called resistance, the opposition to the therapeutic process or defense of one's ego. It's like it occurs when the patient feels their unconscious materials is awakened or their defense is felt threatened, and they need to resist it. So to resist and to avoid seeing the analysis, the patients think cleverly and make lots of different kind of reasons to avoid the sessions, like going late to the session, not paying bill of the analysis, and also making silly reasons to avoid the sessions or act like they forgot the sessions. The patient also will maybe during the sessions can try acting like recalling something, some information that is not even important in that time, to increase the time of the session. When the patient starts to resist, it is a sign that the unconscious materials are ready to be conscious. So another process is transference, making the analysis as one of the important person of the patient's life and transfer their feeling to them. For example, like the patient feel very attached to the analysis because he or she thinks that the analysis is his or her mother, so they get attracted and attached to the analysis and share the feeling of a daughter or son. The feeling toward the analysis is not said to be every time positive, it can be negative too. The main idea of transference is like the patient's interpersonal problems with someone who are important in their life is reenacted with the analysis. Importance of Freud's findings. Influence on how the mind operates. The psychoanalytic ideas influence the practice of psychotherapy. The basic idea of talking here, and some psychologists rely on the techniques like free association or process of transference. The research psychologists also had an interest on topics like unconscious and also defense mechanism. Most of the psychoanalytic terms are still used in everyday life of a person, in basic languages and also logic in understanding one's own behavior and others. For example, if someone tells that their current problem is a cause of poor parenting, it's a basic idea of Freud's theory, like they are connecting their present life with past. So it's a basic idea of Freud, and he also laid the foundation for many of psychologists' questions and topics that they are still addressing. He proposed sequence developmental sequence in the growth of personality, and he also found a method to resolve internal conflicts. Evaluation of Freud's theory. There are different kinds of opinions on Freud's theory. Some of psychologists not accept the theory, and some think that is very usual and useful in their lives. Most of his psychoanalytic ideas and terms are still used in our everyday lives, and Freud's writings are used in fields like medicine, history, anthropology, and other kind of fields. And also, Freud's psychosexual development ideas are played a significant role that initiates the field of developmental psychology. Also, psychoanalytic techniques and the processes that found by Freud is still used in psychotherapy sessions by most of the analysts, maybe in a modified form. If there is a good, there's also always be a bad. So some of the psychologists have critics on Freud's theory. The first one is the Freud's theory doesn't have a clear vision of contemporary research on personality psychology. His theory has less information about the contemporary research on personality theory, personality psychology. There are most psychologists think that the psychoanalysis is just a belief, not a scientific fact, because it doesn't proven by a scientific examination. Another criticism is that the pertains to the nature of the evidence which it was built on, because most of his case studies are based on his interpretation of the observation, not the exact observations. In science world, they need an exact exact proof or evidence to prove everything that they tell or any ideas, theories, techniques a very is appropriate thing. So in this case, Freud doesn't have a proper observation in his case studies. He just gave his interpretation, just his thinking on or overall interpretation on the observation he's seen. So the psychologist think that the evidence for his universal theory of human nature is not acceptable. And also, Freud's emphasis on sexual drives in his theory of childhood development psychology is also inappropriate. Freud's theory suggests that the humans are naturally aggressive, sexual, and impulsive. If the human beings are not supported by the society and also mediated by the superego, the humans would be self-destructed. Most and some of the psychologists don't accept this idea because they think because most and some of the psychologists have different kind of opinions on humans nature, and families also critique on Freud's confusing theory of women because he had said that women are weaker, develop a weaker superego than men, then they have Paris envy, they wish to be a man compared to being a woman, and the feminists feel that he said the wrong, given a wrong information on a woman, that he has under undertaken a real potential of a woman. So the feminists also have critics on him. So there is some goods and some bads on his theories. So as a summary, Freud's theory holds three main forces in the psyche: ID, ego, and superego. The sex and aggression motives generate thoughts that can cause anxiety that vanish in the unconscious mind, and something is needed to hold back it, which is called as defense mechanism. For example, repression. Freud also theorized about five psychosexual stages and its conflict in each stages. And to reveal the unconscious, there are a few techniques and processes. So psychoanalysis is a technique of psychotherapy. The main goal is to make sure the patient realize their problems and the causes so they can solve it. And finally, Freud's theory is have its own goods and badness. Some accepted in and some not. So there are plenty of lessons in chapter 9. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kausalya Sivam and I'm going to present a chapter under the intraphysic domain, which is chapter 10, Psychoanalytic Approaches, the Contemporary Issues. So, let's see what we are going to learn today in this chapter. We are going to learn about the neo-analytic movement, ego psychology, and also the object relation theory. Before we get into this chapter, let us discuss about the case study about Holly Ramona. Holly Ramona is a 23-year-old California girl who was attending a therapeutic session to treat her bulimia. During that session, she began to recall that she was abused by her father, and these memories were aided by the dosage of sodium amytal, which also known as truth serum. when her father known that her daughter recalled back some of these unhappened things, he sued a complaint against the therapist. Her father successfully sued the therapist for negligence, and it was the first case to find the therapist guilty of implanting false memories. So, how Holly Ramona gained these false memories? Is that true that the therapist is the one who overwhelmed and suggests this kind of false memories? Let's learn deep in this chapter and let's know. Psychoanalysis is probably the best thought of as a theory containing ideas variously inspired by Sigmund Freud, and now it's modified and advanced by others. Weston is one of the most active proponent of contemporary psychoanalysis. He defines contemporary psychoanalysis as being based on these five postulates. First one is the unconscious still plays a large role in life, although it may be not be the ambiguous influence the Freud held it was. Secondly, behavior often reflects compromises in conflicts between mental process such as emotion, motivations, and thoughts. Third postulate is childhood plays an important part in personality development, particularly in shaping the adulthood relationship styles. Fourth, mental representative of the self and relationship guide our interaction with others. Last but not least, personality development involves not just regulating sexual and aggressive feelings, but also moving from an immature, socially dependent character to become more matured and also an independent character. Repression and contemporary research on memory. We as a psychologist must be familiar with the name of Elizabeth Loftus. Elizabeth Loftus is a professor of psychology and world-renowned memory researcher. In a article of the myth of repressed memory, she discussed about some individuals who recovered some memories of important events. She argues that we should not conclude that all recovered memories are true, based on the rosy cheat which we study in chapter 9. At the same time, we should not assume that all recovered memories are false memories, like some such as Holly Ramona gained false memories. So now we know that there are a lot of chances to the creation of false memory. But what are those variables contribute to this false memory? First is popular press. There are a lot of books in the market to guide those survivors of abuse. These books are really concerned to comfort the victim of abuse. But for those who have no past on abuse, this book strongly suggests that abuse could have happened in their life, even though there is no memories in their mind. So when the therapist began to ask some questions, the patient more and more believed that there could be chances of abuse. Secondly, is behavior of therapist. Certain attitudes and suggestions of some therapies to the patient can be influential, such as when a patient complains that he had a problem, the therapist may suggest that, is this happened because you reacted on that way that day? So the patient will begin to believe that this may be an impact of that day's event. So these are some example how a therapist can influence the patient false memory. There is some specific technique in psychotherapy such as hypnosis, suggestive interviews, and dream interpretation. Hypnosis is a kind of techniques which can recall back our childhood memories freely. But all these techniques are more often imaginative and emotional. So this have higher tendency to create false memories. Last but not least, imagination inflation effect is occur when a memory is elaborated through imagination. For example, when we just have a key point that abuse, we tend to imagine that we might be abused. We might be abused by our parents. We might be abused by our parents due to their personal problems. So this kind of stuff, this kind of imaginations which elaborated tends to create false memories in ourselves. Model of Memory Spreading Activation by psychologists Henry Roger and Kathleen McDermott. What is spreading activation? Spreading activation is a method for searching associative network, biological and artificial neural network, and semantic networks. So what is the effect of spreading activation? When a part of memory network is activated, activation spread along the associative pathway to relate areas in memories. For example, doctor associated with nurse in most people's mind because there is similarities in both these concepts. The mental association between these two concepts can be demonstrated easily. So this is how false memory form, where we are falsely associate some two different things because it falls under a same concept. Constructive memory is an apparent memory of an event that did not actually happen, unconsciously constructed to fill a gap. Contemporary view on the unconscious. We all know what really unconscious mean, but in psychology there are two views on the unconscious. First one is a cognitive unconscious. This means the content of unconscious mind assumed to operate just like thoughts in consciousness. Subliminal perception, which is where we receive some information in a blink of eyes which does not reach our threshold, so we cannot remember what really the thing is. So cognitive unconscious is basically whatever things we do unconsciously is never rely on anything. But another point of view of this unconscious is motivated unconscious. This motivated unconscious is refers to that hidden and unknown desire of oneself is the reason for things the people do unconsciously. Ego psychology. What is the history behind the study about ego psychology? Freud's version of psychoanalysis was focused about on it, especially the twin instinct of sex and aggression, and how the ego and superego respond to the demand of it. So it was mostly about its psychology. But later psychoanalysts felt that ego deserved more attention, that it performed many constructive functions. So later, daughter of Sigmund Freud, Anna Freud focused on the strength of the ego as it defends the person against the anxiety. So the function of the ego in a person is to establish a secure identity. As a human develops from infant to his adulthood and also to his older age, he mostly tend to create a best version of his or herself. He or her gone through a lot of conflicts in their life to achieve something bigger. So, identity crisis means the depression and confusion a person feels when he or she has not developed a sense of identity by achieving something good. Let us discuss about Erikson's 8 stages of development. I'm going to explain this quite fast as we have already covered this theory in our introduction to psychology. First stage began with infancy. So when a baby is born, the baby is totally dependent on his environment. So the baby's first question is, will they take care of me well? Can I trust them that they will feed me when I feel hungry? Are they going to care when I'm crying? So if a child get enough care from their caregivers, so the child will develop a sense of trust, where this child will grow up into a very approachable person, loving and also a good one. But if a children never get proper affection and care from a caregiver, this will affect the children's future, where he or she will be grown up into be a person who won't trust others easily and also love isolation. Second stage is toddlerhood, where in this stage children love to explore world. They will learn a lot of things and they like to risk to do a lot of risky things. At this time, parents should be very careful in parenting. They should allow their children to explore the world, so this will develop a sense of autonomy. Nevertheless, if a parent becomes very strict and punishmental at this stage, this will develop a sense of shame and doubt in the children's mind. Third stage is a young childhood, where at this time the children learn to play around others. So they will learn to follow the leader, choosing leader, forming a goal. So then during the school activities, they also take the initiative to accomplish goal and to work with the different purpose in mind. If it all goes well, then it will develop a sense of initiative, and in future they will become a very initiative person to accomplish a goal. If not, this will form a guilt in their self and they not even take an initiative to move in their future life. Fourth stage is inferiority versus industry. This is during elementary school, where at this time children should know what is their abilities, what their capabilities is. If he or she doesn't know, this will impact in inferiority. Moving to the fifth one, role confusion versus identity when there is adolescent. During the adolescent, we most probably all of the adolescents should have a career which they can always rely on. If he or she doesn't have a career or a proper idea to what to do, so this will lead to a role confusion. If he or she manage to get a best profession which can always rely on, so this will form an identity in yourself. Isolation versus intimacy during young adulthood is when at this stage everyone will start for looking for their good friendship and also partnership. So if someone tend to get a very good partner at this stage, So they will form a intimacy where the person who unable to find or maintain their partner in their life, they will feel isolation. In moving to the next stage of our life is adulthood, where people will feel generativity if they have accomplished all their goals in life and they have something to share with the young generation. At the same time, if a person never really enjoy his life and he just go with the flow in life, so he will develop a sense of stagnation. Last but not least, at the old age, we have a conflict of despair and integrity, where if we feel we feel satisfied with our life, we will develop a sense of integrity, where if we feel it's just a waste of time to living this long, that will be a despair sense. Karen Horney and a feminist interpretation of psychoanalysis. Karen Horney was another early proponent of ego psychology, where she gains a lot of concept of Freudians. Karen Horney questions some paternalistic notion of Freudian psychoanalysis, basically on that penis and why. Horney thought that penis was a symbol of social power because in every culture, boys or men always portrayed to be a very strong character. This was the only reason why girls desired uh, to have a penis. It was not really desired to become boys. She argues that girls desired the social power and did not really desire to become boys. And she also discovered that Freud's original theory was very harsh towards women, where women bound to become dependent and also women as only a biology determinant outcome. Lastly, emphasis on self and the notion of a narcissism. Role of self is always divided into two concepts, which is a normal personality and in disorder. If a person in normal personality, his self will be self-serving biases where we will take credit for our success yet to deny responsibilities for failure. But for those in disorder, they will always have a self-admiration and a constant attempt to draw attention to their self and to keep people focused on oneself. This is called as a narcissism, and it when it achieves accent, and this will be known as narcissistic personality disorder, will be discussed in chapter 19 later. So there is a paradox, however, commonly called narcissistic paradox, where this kind of people will have a self-doubt on their self always. They need a continuous appraisal from others to make sure they feel worthy about that self. And this kind of people can't handle criticism. So the main problem associated with narcissism is uh, they will they will tend to act more aggressively when they criticize compared to a normal personality who will not react much to critics. So you will learn about object theory relation in my friend's presentation. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Nurul Izzati Wintino Safari. I am the last presenter for this group to continue to present under the subtopic of ego psychology, which is feminist. The first one. It's about Karen Horney and a feminist interpretation on psychoanalysis. So first of all, who is Karen Horney? Karen Horney is a medical doctor and psychoanalyst practicing from 1930 to up to 50, where most of the psychoanalysts are males. She one of an early proponent of ego psychology. She is the first psychoanalyst to recognize the cultural force, not biology, restrict the social roles that women may feel. She had personal knowledge of social and cultural force that oppressed the woman in her era. She was removed from become the instructor in the New York Psychoanalytic Institute because of the vote by her male colleague that disapproving her skeptical attitude toward classical Freudian ideas. After being removed, she established her own American Institute for Psychoanalysis and developed major psychoanalysis, which stressed social influence over biology. She also written highly readable book Honai 1937, 1939, 1945, and 1959 that contained her theories. Unfortunately, she died in 1952 and did not see that the progress of women's movement, which she can truly counted as early leader. Okay. Next, we're gonna talk about what is feminism. So feminism is a range of social movement, political movement, and ideologies that aim to define, establish, and achieve the political, economic, personal, and social equalities of sexes. Feminism incorporates the position that society prioritizes the male point of view and the women are treated unfairly within those societies. Efforts to change that include fighting gender stereotypes and for established educational and professional opportunity for women and for women that are equal to those men. People who fight for this are called feminists. So what's the deal between Karen Horney and a feminist interpretation on psychoanalysis? It starts when the Karen questioned some paternalistic of Freudian psychoanalysis and reformulated some of ideas to generate more feminist perspective on personality development. She recalled the phallic stage that interpreted by Freud, which is penis envy, where the Freud suggests that the girls have sexual conflict as they realize that they don't have penis. Karen thought that instead of organ that women actually desire, penis is seen as social power symbol. She says at early age, the girl realized they denied society power because of their gender and do not have secret desire to be a boy. Instead, the girl desire to receive the same social power and preference given to the boys in the culture at that time. Karen noted that many gender roles determined by culture in that time. For example, whether a person should be ashamed of promiscuous sex is determined by the culture. The male seems to have different standards than females, as when the female doing the promiscuous sex, it seems as shameful, while the male doing that, it can be proud of. But that is the difference between the male and female in that time. Second, about the gender differences in terms of the fear of success in responses to achieve and competition situation. The female fear that they might lose friends if they pursuing their dream. In other hand, the male feel opposite as they thought they need to strive for succeed in order to gain friends. She said, although the biology determines the sex, the cultural norm determines what is acceptable for males and females. So, from his feminist interpretation, she gives a very big contribution. For example, partly because the Honai, today we use masculine and feminine to refer to trait or roles typically associated by being female or males in particular culture. Another contribution is the differences in such culturally ascribed and rules and trait refer as a gender difference, not a sex difference. And because of the feminist interpretation, the women movement are making good progress since her point out the gender difference. And really accept the role of identity, which is experienced by the person as sense of self. Otto Kernberg, 1975, and Hans Kohlhuth, 1977, are important contributors to the psychoanalytic conception of the role of the self in normal personality functioning and in disorder. In normal personality functioning, most of people develop a stable and high level of self-esteem, have some pride in their accomplishment, have realistic ambition, and getting attention and affection from others that they deserve. They also engage in self-serving bias, which refer to a common tendency for people to take credit for success, yet to deny responsibility for failure. But some people take self-esteem too far, which lead to narcissism. So we're going to talk about narcissism. Narcissism happens when some takes self-esteem too far, such trying to increase their self-worth in various problematic ways, constant attempt to draw to the self and keep other focused on oneself as they appear more powerful, independent, and more liked by others. Extreme carried of narcissism can lead to narcissistic personality disorder. However, it can be found in normal range levels characterized as extreme self-focus, sense of feeling special, entitlement, and search for others who willing to serve as one private fan club. However, there is something called paradox, which is necessary paradox. Well, paradox is also known as antinomy, is a logical self-contradictory statement or a statement that runs contrary to one's expectation. So what is narcissism paradox? Person with narcissism paradox actually have doubt about his or her worth, although they appear in self-esteem, appear high in self-esteem. The person need constant praises, reassured attention from others in order to feel comfortable in their shoes. These persons are very vulnerable to blow and cannot handle criticism well. In contemporary psychoanalysis, narcissism is a disturbance in the sense of self. So this is some example that associated with narcissism. The people with narcissism problem or narcissists behave aggressively when being criticized and challenged. They also trying to achieve some respect by attacking and belittling others. The person with narcissistic personality disorder can become at least at risk of become violent if their self-esteem blew. There is some study on narcissism, and I will talk about it. First is Brett Bushman and Roy Baumeister, 1998. Their study is about the subject is asked to write an essay on topic given. Then other person will provide strong criticism to his or her essay. Later, the subject are given the opportunity to blast their opponent to irritate when they playing the video game. The narcissist will tend to blast their opponent aggressively after they are being critiqued, more than the that not being critiqued or the narcissistic person. This findings suggest that narcissism can lead to aggression when the narcissist is provoked or criticized. Next study is a narcissist personality inventory (NPI) from Raskin and Hall in 1979. I will show you. Okay, this is the questionnaire measure the narcissism. The following items are from the Narcissistic Personality Inventory (NPI) from Raskin and Hall, 1979. Is a true/false question. The question sounds like, I think I think I'm a special person. I expect a great deal from other people. I am envious of other people's good fortune. I will never be satisfied until I get all what I deserve, and I really like to be center of attention. This all questionnaire is shows it will be answered true by the narcissist person as they tend to love themselves more than others. In some, narcissism is not same as high esteem. Study had confirmed that the theoretical notion that narcissists are preoccupied with self are vulnerable to criticism and blow to their self-worth, and respond to such challenges with anger and aggression. Next, so for the summary for the emphasis on self and the notation of narcissism, one internal representation of self play an important role on how one interacts with to the social environment. Next, I will talk about object relation theories, the next subtopic. So, objective relation theory is other changes to Freud's original ideas, the new approach that brought the analytic term. It emphasizes the social relationship and their origin in the childhood. Later analysts emphasize the development meaningful social relationship that occur in the audible phase, which is relationship with parent. So there's basic assumption about objective relation theory, which is internal wishes, desire, and urge of a child not as important as development meaningful social relationship, especially with parents. The other particularly the mother become internalized by child in the form of mental object. This of mental object. The child have this mean by the child have unconscious mother within his or her that her or his can relate, which allow child have relationship with internalization object, even with absence of their mother. So I will continue with the early childhood attachment. So work in this field had drawn a few lines of research in developmental psychology. One of the line is Harry Harlow and others' works on infant monkeys. Harlow concludes that attachment between infant and primary caregiver require physical contact with a warm, responsive mother, which is important to their psychological development. Attachment to mother or caregiver development. His studies show that when the infant of the primates really needs the from the Harlow study, we can see that attachment to mother or caregiver are crucial to all primates, including humans, in first 6 months. The infant's attachment toward human begins to develop, such as preference toward human over the object, then narrow to the familiar person, and lastly, their preference narrower to the mother or the primary caregiver. Next, we will talk about the John Bowlby's study. John Bowlby's study. So his study is focused on attachment relationship with mother and how the relationship meet the need of infant for the protection, nurturance, and support. He studied what happened when these attachments are temporarily broken. The children will experience the separation anxiety. From his study, he says that the children will experience separation anxiety. Psychologist Mary Ainsworth and her colleague developed 20-minute procedures that called strange situation procedure. This procedure run by the mother and baby enter a comfortable living room. The mother will sit down and the child is free to explore the toy all over the room. The baby then will be left by the mother with unfamiliar adult for a few minutes. The reaction of a baby after the mother return will be videotaped and later be analyzed. From the study, the children that analyzed can be separated into three groups, which is securely attached, avoidantly attached, and ambivalently attached. The securely attached baby will endure the separation and when exploring the room, waiting patiently or even approaching the stranger and sometimes waiting to be held by the stranger. When the mother returned, the infant were glad to see them, typically interact with them for a while and then back to exploring the new environment. For the avoidantly attached group of children, the infant will avoid the mother when they will return. The infant in this group typically seemed unfazed when the mother left and typically did not give them much attention when they returned, as, as it aloof to their mother. And lastly, the ambivalence attached group. The infant in this group were very anxious about the mother leaving and then started to cry or protesting vigorously before the mother even got out of the room. When the mother were gone, these infants were difficult to calm. On, on the mother returns, however, the infant behaved ambivalently. Their behavior showed both anger and desire to be close to the mother. They approached their mother, but they resisted by screaming and fighting, being held. The mother of these three groups acted differently in terms of affection and responsiveness. The securely attached group of infant mother is usually provide more affection and stimulation to their babies and are generally more responsive than the mother of infant in another group. The mother of baby from both ambivalent and avoidant group tend to be less attentive to their children less responsive to their needs, and such mothers appear to be less in tune and less engaged with their baby. This early experience and reaction called working model by Bowlby for the later adult. The attachment style predicted individual differences in emotional reaction to the and to the post-reunion marital adjustment. Next, I will talk about adult relationship. The research on attachment has tested object relation ideas by examining whether the attachment style developed in childhood is related to the later adult relationship style. The Journal of the Social and Personal Relationship 2010 dedicated for research on how childhood attachment styles are related to adolescent and adult relationships. Cindy Hazen and Philip Saver 1987 research showed that there are patterns of adult relationship that look similar to the secure, avoidant, ambivalent childhood attachment pattern. The relationship style also called by secure relationship, avoidant relationship, and ambivalent relationship. There is positive correlation between the parent-infant attachment style and the later relationship styles in adulthood. So I will continue with measuring attachment style. Recall from the chapter 4, personality dimension rarely were types that the people do not come into category but represented by score along a usual normal curve dimension. Yet, in attachment style areas, people are put into categories. Recent research show how the attachment style represent better by dimension. For example, degree of security, degree of avoidance, and degree of ambivalent. I will show the example of the type of measuring the attachment style. This is example of the the way to measure the style of attachment. This question determining which adult attachment style a person can be accomplished by having them report which style is most like them. Consider the following statement and choose which is the most descriptive of you. Number one question is, I am typically comfortable with others and find it easy to become close friend with others. I can easily come to rely on others and enjoy it when they rely on me. I don't worry about being left out or abandoned and find it easy to let others get close to me. If the person choose this number, it will show that the person is a secure and be more confident and be willing to be maybe I can with readiness to become close and make them the dominant of the theory is that the person's vibration First, I will talk about the people in with the secure attachment in the relationship. The person in the secure with the secure attachment can be separated from their partner without distress, and the person seem to be more warm and supportive to their partner. They also give emotional support to their partner when their partner need that. Next, I would like to talk about the person who have avoided attachment in relationship. Person who have avoidant attachment in the romantic relationship tend to shun the romance, believe that believing real love is rare and never lasts. This type of person also fear intimacy and rarely develop deep emotional commitment. And likely this person not to be very supportive, at least not emotionally. Next, I would like to talk about the ambivalent attachment. The person with ambivalent attachment tend to have frequent but a short-lived relationship. They will fall in and out of love easily, but rarely say that they are happy in their relationship. They sometimes develop the desperation in their adult relationship and show fear of losing partner. They often keep the other happy by quick to the compromise and change their self to avoid the conflict with other. This type of person will be stressful when they are separated from their partner. That's all I would tell about the object relation theory. And now I will give summary about this topic of psychoanalytic approaches contemporary issue. So this chapter is divided to three subtopics, which is neo-analytic movement, ego psychology, and objective relationship theory. In this chapter, we explore alternative version of some Freud original idea. We begin with the evolution of repressed memory, examining a case in which the recalled memory turned out to be true, at least determined by the court of law. In the neo-analytic movement, with the subtopic of repression and contemporary research on memory and the contemporary views on the unconscious. This case should not put doubt on possibility of real abuse and trauma causing the memories to be forgotten or repressed. Indeed, such cases do exist and confirm to be the notion that traumatic experience can be pushed out of consciousness. However, the material in this chapter is meant to lead to more balanced approach to the topic of repressed memory. Some memories can be implanted by well-meaning therapists and other false memory. Integrating subject about an event. We also discuss on how to discriminate real from the false memory. The crucial element of the corroboration, finding someone who can support the subject version of the remembered event. The view of the repressed memory also highlights a more contemporary version of the unconscious. Although the most modern cognitive psychology believes in unconscious, they do not believe in the motivated version of unconscious proposed by Freud. Certainly, the material can get into the mind without conscious experience, as thought subliminal perception. But the material does not have kind of sweeping motivational effect suggested by Freud. Next, under the subtopic of ego psychology, we learn about the Erikson 8 stage of development, Karen Horney and a feminist interpretation of psychoanalysis, and emphasis on self and the notion of narcissism. Another reconstruction of Freud theory concerns that emphasis on the role of the ego relative to the id. This is in stark contrast to Freud's emphasis on aggressive and sexual id urge as the twin engines powering physic life. We discuss two proponents in ego psychology. The first is Erik Erikson, was well known for his alternative theory of the personality development, which differed from Freud in several important ways, including emphasis on social tasks and extension of development through the entire lifespan. The second figure in ego psychology was Karen Horney, was among the first psychoanalysts to consider the role of culture and social roles in central feature in personality development. Horney also started a feminist reinterpretation of Freud's theories, which continue to this day. Ego psychology also generated an interest in the development of sense of self and the protection of self through the various strategies such as the narcissism. Lastly, the subtopic of ego relationship theory, which have two subtopics, which is early childhood attachment and adult relationship. Object relation theory is another major new development in this era, have been called the most important theoretical development in psychoanalysis since Freud's death. The term object relation is used to refer enduring pattern of behavior in relationship with intimate other, as well as to the emotional, cognitive, and motivational process that generate those patterns of behavior. The theory is about how relationship process that generate pattern of behavior. This theory began with study of attachment between the children and primary caregiver, typically mother. This bond may set a pattern that continues into adulthood. Also important are the experience the growing child has with the relationship he or she observes between parents. This also internalized in the form of mental representations for how people get along and what appropriate behavior in a relationship. That's the summary of this chapter. Thank you for listening and Assalamualaikum and bye.